Our next speaker is going to be Murphy McCann. He's my colleague here at Spearhead. He has an extensive background as well. And he's going to be presenting about the future of AI and the AI industry and how it's affected by recent development.
Well, thanks, Nick. Just give everybody a sense of kind of where we are now. It might give me if you're not really well familiar with everything, it might give you a sense of what's happened up until now and maybe what to expect, at least for like the coming 12 months. And so with that, I'll say one other thing about anything that I say, I am not going to recommend to buy or sell any investments whatsoever. We're going to talk about some of them, but none of this is a recommendation one way or the other. So can everybody hear me well enough?
Yeah.
Anyway, so the biggest, the fastest growing, largest industry in the world right now is the AI industry. So let me break that down for you, what that means. There at the core, you guys have heard of OpenAI and ChatGPT, right? You guys have heard of Grok. You've heard of Gemini, Google's Gemini. You've heard of DeepSeek, maybe. These are all models they're software models that actually predict, they can actually write text, they can talk for you. It's really novel technology. The technology actually has really far-reaching, the direction of it is going to places where these models will actually be able to do a lot of things that normal humans can do in terms of thoughts, and eventually be able to actually do things for you. And they'll eventually be able, beyond that, to be able to run organizations and maybe even societies to some extent. So, and the quickest way to summarize where we are is that we are in the first inning of this game, of at least a 9-inning game here with regard to the software. And the software is very, very compute intensive. And we saw a smattering of this when people got real fond of Bitcoin mining. You got to see real fast how compute intensive some things can be. Basically, all these things, when you want to respond to your girlfriend and you just want to do it, that actually takes a lot of power and a lot of sophisticated software to do. So there is, in order to get this whole industry off the ground, we still need a lot of infrastructure. We're going to talk about how much in a little bit. The other thing that I want to talk more about is the software and where it's headed and where companies potentially benefit. And then I'll also talk about some of the recent things with tariffs around the world and the geopolitical situation and how that impacts. So the infrastructure build over the next 5 years, people are saying $3.5 to $4 trillion are going to get spent building data centers. That is, they actually have a breakdown for that. There's almost $2 trillion just for the processors themselves. You guys have heard of NVIDIA, right?
Yes.
We all, they are the leading manufacturer of AI computer processors. There's a bunch of other software and hardware that goes around these chips, and we're going to be spending probably $0.5 to $1 trillion of that on that in the next 5 years. And then construction of buildings and air conditioners and, cooled oil vats and all the rest of that is going to be the remainder. But so it's a really substantial amount of money that we're going to be spending. And if anybody has heard, there's a little bit of controversy in the marketplace about, Chinese models are going to require less computing power and so forth. My view on all of that is that with all of the models coming to market and being used, there is no shortage of demand for compute power for all of these models going forward. We have a lot of work to do in terms of developing the models. We also have a lot of work to do in terms of deploying them and people actually just using them day to day. Again, when you ask, ChatGPT to draw a picture of a palm tree with a duck the size of a horse, went along and, guess what? You're probably going to want to change the color of the horse, right? And that'll take a ton of compute power. It is just the demand on this infrastructure is growing exponentially, and it's very, very significant. We do not have enough built in the ground as we're talking to even come close to satisfying the demands that we have on this infrastructure. So one of the things I want to talk about was just to break down on the hardware side, so the critical part of all this are the processors, the chips. We've all heard, hopefully, of NVIDIA and the Blackwell chip. They are the pinnacle of the AI processing world. And I wanted to give everybody just, one of the things that's happening is that if you were to talk about this a year ago, you would have mentioned two names probably in this space. On the hardware side, you would have mentioned NVIDIA. And on the software side, you would have mentioned OpenAI. And that would have been it. Well, guess what? There's a flood of new entrants in there now. And on the computing side, there's people talking about, competing with NVIDIA. And I want to just give a few high-level facts to let you decide where the landscape might be going in terms of processors. So NVIDIA's Blackwell chip, the throughput on that, the power of that chip is 1,410 teraflops. Just keep that number 1410, because I don't even fully know what a teraflop is either. You understand? And that chip uses 1,200 watts to run for, it's a 1,200 watt chip. So it's 1,200 watts per hour, 1,200 kilowatt hours per hour and so forth. Contrast that with, and guess what? NVIDIA charges 30 to 40,000 bucks per chip, and they can make about 50,000 of these chips per month. The nearest competitor is nowhere close. I just want to make that real clear in people's minds. There's AMD has chips, Broadcom is developing chips. Huawei, I want to focus on Huawei for a second. They're a Chinese manufacturer. They're trying to get into the market. And their nearest competitor, just so you know, if Blackwell did 1,410, Huawei's chip can only do half that in terms of, it only has half the compute power. Huawei wants to charge about half the price for their chip, but guess their throughput, their ability to manufacture is only 20% of what NVIDIA can do just on Blackwell, right? So they're nowhere close. And guess what? The other big player in the market is also NVIDIA with their number 2 chip that they can make 50,000 units a month in as well. So on the hardware side, just continue to think of NVIDIA. What's going to happen over time is we know how much NVIDIA is making on all this business. They're generating $45 billion a year in cash flow. It's just, it's a massive business. They're in a very strong position, but people are going to continue to chip away at them. They're just they can't hold a candle to them. And they probably won't for several years. So I wanted to give you that backdrop. So let's move from, that's an update on the hardware side and the most important part, I think. And let's just talk about the software build-up. We talked about ChatGPT, and what is ChatGPT? At its core, it's a model that actually writes sentences and words and forms ideas that can follow along with thought. Well, OpenAI has ChatGPT, but guess what? All the other majors want their own equivalent of ChatGPT. So you've got Google with Gemini, you've got Meta, they're developing a thing called Llama, you've got, which is Elon's baby. And then you've got China, which came out with there's a bunch of companies in China looking to get into the space as well. DeepSeek is one that made a name for itself. And what I would say about all these models is that they are all different. So, and the major point in that is that the AI software world is actually very diverse, and it's going to become more diverse over time. You had this model out there, ChatGPT, that kind of did something that is broadly applicable to a lot of people. But when you start to break down, the various things that it could do, there are other entrants that are doing other little facets of what ChatGPT could do better. I like Grok. I like Gemini. I use them both. I haven't used Llama yet, but I'm sure it's going to be awesome. It's going to be able to do a number of things. And then you think about, and these are just models that are writing sentences and formulating ideas and doing research and bringing research into a nice cogent, paragraph or outline, or, it can do a chart for you or whatever. But when you think about where these things are headed next, it's mind blowing, the things that are coming out in terms of their capability. And you really need to keep your ear to the ground in terms of what the next chapters of this. I think you see some glimpses of this if you look at, why am I spacing on the name? Palantir. So Palantir, actually, you can see a pretty wide set of capabilities that are being developed across the industry. If you look at their software, there's demos of Palantir software. There's demos of it actually running a battlefield and choosing which tanks to send where and how many sources. Basically, this thing is thinking way beyond like what many people in a room can do. Is doing it efficiently and quickly. All these Geminis and Llamas and they are all going to be morphing towards this space at some point. Again, the demand on the compute power is going to be really, really significant. And the use cases are going to be really, really compelling. Already we're seeing droves of computer programmers getting sidelined because guess what? All these models can write code. We don't need Python programmers anymore. We don't need nearly as many programmers in other languages because these jobs are already being taken by these models. So we talked about the core engines. And then what I want to also talk about are the other software packages that use these core engines and deliver specific applications to people. So you've got, just for instance, Microsoft tries to do their thing by weaving AI. They try to open AI into all the Microsoft products like Word and stuff. You've got more sophisticated things with regards to Salesforce.com. I was talking to somebody using, wherever he was. He wants to use AI to, handle marketing for his real estate business. There are companies all the way around these core models that are building out solutions for people to use in their everyday lives. And so that's one set of companies, and that's really significant. The other thing is we've seen automobiles start to adopt this, or actually really adopt this. So you've got, I don't know how many people have actually spent time in LA recently and seen the auto driving cars from Google, right? So you have fully automated taxi drive taxis, that are up and going. Google's produced stuff. And we know that Elon wants to get his on the road someday. There will be others. All those cars need AI computing capabilities. They need the ability to recognize, people and things on the road, not crash into them. And then you've got this full world of robotics. And if you've followed that at all, the world of has gotten really diverse really fast. We've got, people that want to make robots to replicate a McDonald's restaurant. We got your own personal, everybody wants their own personal robot, right? Like wash dishes, make food. So, this robot's going to be walking around here. I mean, Elon's got one, other people have developed them. That thing is loaded with AI. I mean, it is all image recognition stuff, motor skills for the thing to open the refrigerator door and grab the egg without breaking it. All that stuff is heavily AI intensive, and it's just another giant, big, fat use case that is going to be consuming chips and compute power exponentially versus what we've seen in the past for years. And so let's move on to how the world is kind of shaping around this. We have a slightly new world order, which is, every country is going to import anything, or any importer that wants to buy something from overseas is going to get a 10% tariff on what comes in. All the rest of the noise is going to get way, way, way tough. And that's kind of my base case. And 10% on the way in for goods and service, or in these goods, probably if also not services, we'll probably have a war on that too. Probably somewhere around 10%. And it's a very manageable number. The producer overseas will eat a piece of it. The importer will eat a piece of it. And, the rest is just, it's not going to be that big. So, the demand for chips, right now, Trump said, I think Taiwan is supposed to pay a 34% tariff for these goods imported here are going to incur a 34% tariff. I really think that that's going to get dialed down. Right now, all of these companies rely on Taiwan, but just ratchet those expectations down to something approximately at 10%. And it's just not that big a deal. It's not, again, 3.5 to 4 trillion getting spent over the next, 5 years is not going to get derailed by this. US based software companies, Microsoft, Google, Meta, etc., Oracle, all the biggest companies, more than half of their revenues are overseas. So they are potentially a target for reciprocating tariffs. I think it's manageable for them in the same way that it's manageable for us. In my base case of it's 10%. And, there will be carve-outs and, special negotiations or special interests. So this is a really big topic. I tried to summarize it the best I could and how many minutes I spent. I tried to get it to 15 minutes, but sure, it took more. Does anybody have any questions?